My home was now under a bridge, a perfect place if you could ignore the constant hum of cars and the damp smell. I gave my whole life so my daughter, my little Olivia, could live her dreams. She became a world-renowned millionaire artist, while I was left with nothing. When she finally found me, I knew this moment would change everything. But she had no idea I was there not for help, but for something far more valuable. And what happened next changed both of our lives forever. My new home was a masterpiece of urban decay, a symphony of rusty rebar and concrete, with the faint hum of traffic providing a constant, miserable lullaby. I'm not a dramatic person by nature, but when your bed is a discarded pallet and your roof is an interstate overpass, you tend to get a bit poetic about the absurdities of life. Evelyn Reed, 62 years young, and living proof that a good life can unravel faster than a cheap sweater. Just a few years ago, I had a two-story house in a Phoenix suburb with a rose garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. I had a daughter, Olivia, my whole world, a real prodigy with a paintbrush. I'd worked my fingers to the bone, 2 jobs, to send her to a private art school, pouring every penny into her future. I sold my mother's antique hutch, my favorite piece, just to cover her art supplies. I gave her everything. And now, I had nothing. The irony of it all was a constant, bitter companion. Olivia had become a sensation. Her career exploded like fireworks factory on the 4th of July. Her abstract paintings were selling for 5, 6, 7 figures. She had a penthouse in New York, a villa in Tuscany, and a car collection that could rival a small museum. I was so proud I could burst. I'd show her magazine interviews to the ladies at the market. "That's my girl," I'd say. "Isn't she something?" I truly believed her success was our success. She was always busy, of course, too busy for a simple phone call, but she'd send postcards with a quick scrawled note. That was enough, or so I told myself. Then came the medical bills. Just a small, benign tumor. The doctor said it was an outpatient procedure, nothing to worry about. But the insurance company, that grand, faceless institution I'd been paying for 40 years, declared the procedure experimental and denied coverage. My savings vanished, swallowed by a bureaucratic black hole. I had to sell the house. Every memory of my life gone with it. I called Olivia, of course. My daughter, the millionaire. She'll help, I thought. Family is family. I left a timid voicemail. "Honey, I know you're busy, but I've hit a snag." I waited and waited and waited some more. Her calm never came. Weeks turned into months. My texts and emails went unanswered. It was like I had ceased to exist. After the house sold and the medical bills were paid, I had just enough left for a cheap motel for a month. When that ran out, I found myself here. Homelessness is a fascinating, brutal education. You learn the precise weight of a cardboard box and the peculiar warmth of a borrowed blanket. The world narrows to the next meal, the next dry spot to sleep. My daughter, my brilliant, beautiful Olivia, was a world away, living a life of unimaginable luxury, while I was hunting for a patch of pavement that wasn't too damp. It was a funny sort of cruelty, a dark joke at my expense. The woman who sacrificed everything for her child was now a ghost, abandoned by that very child. But I wasn't going to sit here and be a victim. I was watching. I was learning. I was seeing the world from a perspective no one else gets. I saw the kindness of strangers and the disdain of the privileged. I saw the profound, bone-deep loneliness of being invisible. I wasn't a sad story. I wasn't a victim. I was just stuck. That I knew, with the kind of certainty that only comes from staring up at the belly of an overpass every night, that this wasn't the end. My heart ached for my lost life, but something else was simmering inside me, hot and a little bitter. It was the feeling of being wronged, of being discarded like a piece of trash. It was the crushing realization that the person I had sacrificed for saw me as a faded photograph from a past she'd rather forget. I couldn't help but wonder if all her success had poisoned her soul. As I sat there, watching the endless stream of headlights blur into streaks of light, a plan started to form. What if this wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning? And what if, just maybe, I had to tell my side of it? Because a story told by one person is always a half-truth. And my dear daughter was about to learn that there are two sides to every tale. With a slight wicked smile, I knew exactly what I was going to do. What happens next changes everything. The person I had become was not the person she remembered, and she was about to find that out the hard way. Stay tuned to see how I finally got my revenge.
It's one thing to be down on your luck and another entirely to be down on your luck while your millionaire daughter is jet-setting across the globe. The thought of it was a constant, sharp little thorn in my side. I didn't want to feel bitter, but honestly, how could I not? I mean, she was literally living the life I had worked my entire life to give her. Every luxury, every comfort, all of it was built on my sleepless nights and sacrifice savings. It's a good thing I never went into professional poker because the irony of my situation was a hand I couldn't bluff my way out of. I was an architect of a life I would never get to live. My canvas wasn't a gallery wall. It was the grimy underside of a bridge, and the art I was creating was a whole new level of self-sufficiency. My first mission was to find a phone. Not a fancy new one, just one that worked. I had an old, battered smartphone that had seen better days, but the battery was dead, and I had no way to charge it. So I started my little odyssey. I walked for what felt like miles, past boutiques and cafes where people sipped lattes and scrolled through their phones, completely oblivious to the world outside their little bubble. The city was a character in my story, a harsh, unforgiving antagonist. I found a public library, a beacon of hope in a sea of indifference. The librarians, bless their kind souls, let me use a computer for a few minutes. I logged into my old email. Piles of junk mails, spam, and a few angry letters from bill collectors I couldn't pay. And then, there it was, an email from Olivia's agent, a woman named Vanessa. The subject line was, Olivia Vance, Philanthropic Efforts. I opened it, my hands shaking. The email was a press release. It announced Olivia's new foundation, a charity dedicated to helping underprivileged youth get access to art education and resources. My heart sank and a wave of black humor washed over me. The girl who let her own mother live on the streets was starting a charity for underprivileged youth? The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The press release included a quote from Olivia herself. It's a travesty that so many talented young people have their dreams crushed by a lack of resources. I want to be a beacon of hope, just as my mother was for me. I almost laughed. My mother? What a title. It was a role she apparently felt was best played from a distance, preferably a continent or two away. The plan started to solidify in my mind. I needed to expose her, not just to get back at her, but to show the world the real Olivia, the one who preached compassion while practicing cruelty. I knew what I had to do. I had to go to her world. It was a crazy idea. A homeless woman showing up at a high-profile art exhibition in New York City? The logistics were insane. I had no money, no connections, nothing but a sense of fierce, righteous indignation. My mind, which had felt so foggy and defeated just an hour ago, was now a laser-focused machine. My goal was clear. I had to expose the lie, to show everyone the beautiful, successful artist who had abandoned her own flesh and blood. The woman I had raised from a girl was a master of a beautiful lie. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of mental planning. The first step, get to New York. I knew I couldn't hitchhike. It was far too dangerous. The only way was by bus, but that required money. The last of my savings had gone to the motel. I had to find a job, any job. I spent a long, agonizing day searching for work, but who hires a 62-year-old woman with no permanent address? It seemed hopeless, another brick wall in the maze of my life. I found myself back under my bridge, feeling defeated. But then I looked at the old, broken smartphone. It was a piece of junk, sure, but what if it wasn't? What if it was my key? I remembered an old friend, a tech wizard who used to fix computers for a living. His number was in my contacts on this useless device. I had to find a way to charge it. The library closed at 5 p.m., but there had to be somewhere else. I was a woman on a mission, a ghost from the past with a phone, a plan, and a whole lot of righteous fury. My daughter had no idea what was coming for her. I was a ghost, a forgotten memory, but ghosts have a way of haunting the living, and the person I was now was a far cry from the woman she remembered. The real battle was just beginning, and you won't want to miss how I finally started to turn the tables on her.
My first real break came from the unlikeliest of places, a small, family-owned hardware store on the outskirts of downtown. I was just about to give up, my feet aching from walking and my stomach growling in a most unladylike manner when I saw the "Help Wanted" sign taped to the door. It was a long shot, but what did I have to lose? I walked in, and the smell of sawdust and fresh paint was a stark, almost comforting contrast to the stale city air I had become so accustomed to. The owner, a man named Frank with a perpetually tired but kind face, was behind the counter. I braced myself for the usual dismissal. "I don't have a place to live, but I'm a hard worker," I said, figuring honesty was my only card to play. He just looked at me for a long moment, not with pity, but with a simple, weary understanding. He told me he couldn't offer me much, just a few hours a day stocking shelves and cleaning up, but he could pay me in cash, under the table. It was a lifeline. The days that followed were a blur of work and planning. I was exhausted, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose. I was earning my way, not begging or relying on handouts. It felt good. My mind was sharp, and every time I stacked a can of paint or swept up a pile of sawdust, I was thinking about my next move. Frank was a decent man, and he didn't pry. He'd just nod and give me a cup of coffee at the end of my shift. That coffee was a small act of kindness that meant more than any grand gesture. It was a reminder that the world wasn't entirely made of Olivias. It was full of Franks, too. I finally had enough money to buy a cheap prepaid burner phone and a portable charger. It was a technological marvel, a key to a world I had been shut out of. I charged up my old smartphone, the one with all my contacts, and felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the first real step of my plan. The problem, of course, was finding her. Olivia was a ghost, a public figure who was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. She was in magazines and on television, but her real-world location was a closely guarded secret. I couldn't just walk into her New York penthouse. It would be easier to get into Fort Knox. I needed a way to get her attention, to lure her out into the open. That's when I remembered an old friend from my days in the Phoenix art scene, a woman named Beatrice, who was a high-end art critic. We had lost touch over the years, but I still had her number. I dialed it, my heart pounding in my chest. What if she didn't remember me? What if she thought I was crazy? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Just as I was about to hang up, a familiar, slightly haughty voice answered. "Beatrice Dubois speaking." I took a deep breath. "B, it's Evelyn Reed, from Phoenix." There was a long pause, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. "Evelyn? Good heavens! It's been ages! What on earth have you been up to?" I kept my story simple. I told her I was in New York for a visit and was hoping to see her. We made plans to meet for coffee the next day.
I hung up the phone, a small, triumphant smile on my face. This was it. The first piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Beatrice was my ticket. She knew everyone in the art world. She would know how to get to Olivia. I just had to convince her to help me. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Beatrice was a shark. She was all about status and appearances, and I was, to put it mildly, not exactly presenting my best self. I had to somehow bridge the gap between the woman she remembered and the woman I was now, without revealing the whole messy truth. It was a delicate dance, a tightrope walk over a canyon of humiliation. The next day, I dressed in the cleanest clothes I owned and met Beatrice at a small cafe. She looked exactly as I remembered, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of untouchable sophistication. She gave me a once-over, her eyes lingering on my worn-out shoes, and her smile faltered just for a second. "You look rustic, Evelyn." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It's the new bohemian chic, Bea. You just haven't heard about it yet." We talked about old times, about the art scene in Phoenix, and about her life in New York. I steered the conversation to Olivia, carefully, casually. "I hear my daughter is quite the sensation," I said, as if it was new information. Beatrice's eyes lit up. "Olivia Vance? Oh, Evelyn! She's a titan, a true genius. The city is practically at her feet." She went on, gushing about Olivia's talent and her new foundation, the Olivia Vance Foundation for the Arts. I just nodded, a polite smile plastered on my face, while inside a storm was brewing. I felt like a spy in my own life, a woman listening to a stranger praise a daughter who had left her to die on the streets. I finally decided to make my move. "Bea, I have a story for you, a story about Olivia, a story that no one has ever heard before." Her expression changed instantly. Her shark-like instincts kicked in, and I knew I had her hooked. You might think I was a fool for trusting a woman like Beatrice, but I knew what I was doing. The art world is all about spectacle, and I was about to give them a show they would never forget. The question wasn't if she'd betray me, but what she would do with a story so juicy, so devastatingly true. To find out, you'll have to keep reading.
Beatrice was a master of her craft, and her craft was gossip. I watched her eyes as I spoke, the way they lit up like a Christmas tree as I hinted at a story so explosive it could detonate Olivia's career. I didn't give her all the details, of course. I just fed her breadcrumbs. I told her I had a tale of ambition and betrayal, of a past that Olivia had worked so hard to bury. I painted myself as a sad, lonely figure, a woman who had given her all and been forgotten. It was a role I didn't have to act. I was a professional at being pathetic. But I also made it clear that my story wasn't just a sob story, it was a bombshell. It was the kind of thing an ambitious journalist would kill for. I hinted that I had proof, that I had documents and emails, little details that would prove my story was true. I was playing a dangerous game, but I had nothing left to lose. Beatrice was torn. Her professional ethics, if she had any, were warring with her insatiable hunger for a career-defining scoop. She knew that a story like this would make her, the kind of story that would be on the front page of every art magazine and celebrity tabloid. "Evelyn," she said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, "are you sure about this? Are you sure you want to go public?" I just looked her dead in the eye. "Bea, I'm sure of one thing. My daughter's entire brand is built on a lie. She's a philanthropist who can't even be bothered to call her own mother? The world needs to know the truth." That did it. I had appealed to her sense of self-importance and her thirst for a story.
She made a few calls, tapping away on her phone with a manic intensity. "Okay," she said finally, "I can get you in. Olivia is having a major exhibition opening next week. It's for her new collection, Homeward. The theme is about finding your way back to your roots." The irony is just delicious. The exhibition was going to be my stage, the grand reveal, my moment to expose the lie to the world. Beatrice gave me a ticket, a sleek black card with embossed gold lettering. It felt like a ticket to another life, a life I had once lived and was now trying to reclaim. The plan was simple and insane. I would show up at the exhibition, unannounced, and confront her. Not with anger, not with yelling, but with the quiet, devastating power of truth. I would be her ghost, her past, a reminder of everything she had tried so hard to forget. The days leading up to the exhibition were a blur. I spent them preparing not for a party, but for a war. I used my cash to get a secondhand dress from a thrift store, something simple and elegant that wouldn't scream homeless. I even found a pair of decent flats. I couldn't afford a stylist, so I did my own hair and makeup. I wanted to look respectable, not like a woman who had been living under a bridge. I wanted to look like her mother. When the day of the exhibition arrived, I took the subway to Manhattan. The city was a whirlwind of noise and motion, but I was focused, my mind clear. I was a woman on a mission, and nothing was going to stop me. I found the gallery, a modern, minimalist building in a trendy neighborhood. A long line of people were waiting to get in, all dressed in black, looking serious and important. The air was buzzing with anticipation. I walked up to the bouncer, a mountain of a man, with a polite but firm expression. I held out my ticket, and he looked at me, then at the card, and then back at me. I could see the suspicion in his eyes, but he let me in. The gallery was a spectacle. White walls, dramatic lighting in Olivia's paintings, a series of enormous, vibrant canvases with swirls of color and texture. People were milling about, sipping champagne, their voices a low, pretentious hum. I found a corner, out of the way, and waited. My heart was pounding, a drum solo in a quiet room. I watched Olivia, who was surrounded by a crowd of admirers. She was radiant, her smile as bright as a spotlight. She looked so happy, so successful, so utterly, completely fake. I knew what I had to do. The moment was approaching. My revenge was at hand. I was a ghost in a room full of people, but I was a ghost with a purpose. They all thought they were there to see art, but they were about to witness a real-life drama, a masterpiece of truth and consequences. The show was about to begin, and the finale was going to be something they'd never forget.
The gallery was a symphony of pretension. People floated from one painting to the next, their conversations a meaningless jumble of words like subversive, visceral, and juxtaposition. I found a quiet spot near the back, a perfect vantage point from which to observe my daughter in her element. She was the star of the show, a radiant goddess in a simple black dress, a masterpiece herself. The crowd orbited her, their faces upturned and full of adulation. A wave of bitterness washed over me, a familiar acrid taste on my tongue. She looked so happy, so fulfilled. But I knew the truth. All this beauty, all this success was built on a foundation of betrayal and neglect. She was a fraud, and I was her living, breathing secret. I watched her for what felt like an eternity. She was gracious and charming, signing autographs and posing for photos. She even gave a little speech, her voice as smooth as silk. "This collection," she said, gesturing to the canvases, "is about finding your way home. It's about the journey back to your roots, to the people who made you who you are." My mouth twisted into a wry smile. If she knew how close her roots were to her, she'd probably faint on the spot. I was her roots,
and I was about to show her what happens when you try to sever them with an axe made of lies. The irony was so thick I could practically choke on it. The crowd applauded, a wave of sincere, heartfelt appreciation for a woman who was a walking, talking lie. I had to wait for the right moment. The gallery was too crowded, too public. I needed a more intimate space, a private confrontation where she couldn't hide behind her entourage. I knew the layout of these events from my days as a suburban mom who dabbled in local art shows. There would be a back office, a place where the important people went to talk business and where the artists could take a break from the throng. I just had to get there. As the crowd began to thin out, I saw my chance. I slipped past the security guard who was more interested in his phone than in the people around him. I walked with a purpose, as if I belonged there. I found the door, a plain, unassuming thing that blended into the wall. I opened it and stepped inside. It was a stark contrast to the gallery. The air was cool and quiet, and the walls were bare. There was a simple desk, a few chairs, and nothing else. I sat down and waited. My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum solo. This was it, the moment of truth. It wasn't long before I heard voices outside. The door opened, and in walked Olivia, followed by her agent, Vanessa, and a man I recognized as a major art collector. They were laughing, their voices a symphony of self-satisfaction. The laughter died in their throats when they saw me. Olivia's face went from a smile to a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, were locked on mine. "Mom?" she whispered, as if the word itself were a foreign language. The art collector and Vanessa exchanged a bewildered look. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly in my lap, a small, knowing smile on my face. "Hello, Olivia," I said, my voice as calm as a summer breeze. "You look surprised to see me. I'm surprised you even remembered who I was." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop and probably the collective gasp of everyone in the room. Vanessa was the first to recover. "Olivia, who is this?" she asked, her voice sharp and full of suspicion. "This," I said, my voice firm and clear, "is your boss's mother, the one she abandoned on the streets after I gave her everything. I believe she's using my story for her new Homeward collection." The art collector looked at Olivia, his face a mixture of confusion and disappointment. He looked at me, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. The irony, the drama, the potential for scandal. This was the kind of story that sold art. Olivia stood there, frozen, a deer caught in the headlights. Her perfect facade was cracking, and I could see the fear and panic in her eyes. It was a beautiful thing to witness. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the thrill of a plan coming together, of finally getting my chance to speak the truth. I had her. I had her exactly where I wanted her. This was just the beginning of my revenge. The real show was about to start, and she was going to be the main event. I had her cornered, and the truth was a loaded gun. But a bullet isn't always the most effective weapon. My real plan was more subtle, more devastating. You might think you know what happens next, but trust me, you don't. The real revenge is just beginning, and you'll have to keep reading to see how I finally get my justice.
The silence in the room stretched out, thick and heavy with unspoken accusations. Olivia's mouth was a small, stunned O, her perfect composure completely shattered. The collector, a man named Mr. Finch, cleared his throat, his gaze darting between me and Olivia. Vanessa, the ever-pragmatic agent, was the first to regain her footing. "Mrs. Reed, I understand this must be an emotional time for you, but barging into a private meeting is completely unprofessional." She said my name with a sneer, as if it were a four-letter word. I met her condescension with a calm, almost serene smile. "Unprofessional? Darling, you haven't seen unprofessional. Unprofessional is a millionaire artist using her homeless mother's story for her art and a fake foundation."
Olivia finally found her voice, a small, trembling thing I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, please, this isn't the place. We can talk later." I just shook my head. "No, Olivia. The time for later was months ago. It was when I was losing my home. It was when I was living under a bridge. The time is now." Mr. Finch, clearly intrigued, interjected. "Is this true, Olivia? Your mother, she was homeless?" Olivia's face went crimson. She looked at me with a desperate, pleading expression. But there was no pity in my heart, only a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just here to get revenge. I was here for justice. She had a platform built on a lie, and I was going to be the one to tear it down, brick by painful brick. I pulled a crumpled piece of paper from my pocket. It was a copy of the press release Vanessa had emailed me, the one about the Olivia Vance Foundation for the Arts. I smoothed it out on the desk and pointed to the quote from Olivia. "It's a travesty that so many talented young people have their dreams crushed by a lack of resources. I want to be a beacon of hope, just as my mother was for me." I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. "A beacon of hope. That's a nice sentiment, isn't it? Especially when your own mother, the one who gave you everything, was living on the streets?" Vanessa scoffed. "This is a new low, Mrs. Reed, trying to extort money from your daughter at her own show." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Extort? Vanessa, my daughter has millions. If I wanted money, I would have just asked for it. I'm here for something more valuable than money. I'm here for the truth." Mr. Finch was now fully invested. He looked at Olivia, his expression a mixture of fascination and disgust. He was a businessman, a man who dealt in art but also in reputation. A scandal like this could destroy an artist's career, and he was watching it unfold in real time. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and serious, "is there any truth to this?" Olivia was trapped. She couldn't deny it. The evidence, in the form of my very existence, was right there in front of her. She stammered, "Mr. Finch, it's a private family matter." I stepped forward, my voice a clear, ringing bell. "A private family matter that she's making a very public spectacle of with this collection? This isn't Homeward, Olivia. It's homeless. And you're the one who put me there." The silence that followed was so complete it was a character in itself. Olivia's mask of composure shattered, revealing the desperate, frightened girl she was underneath. She wasn't a millionaire artist anymore. She was just a liar who had been caught. My plan was working perfectly. She had a choice to make, and whatever she chose, I was going to win. You might be wondering what my end game is. Did I want money? Did I want her to grovel? The answer is far more complicated and far more devastating for her. What I had planned next was going to hit her where it hurt the most. You won't want to miss a single second of it.
The look on Olivia's face was a masterpiece of conflicting emotions, shock, fear, and a flash of hatred that was so cold it could have come straight from a block of ice. It was the face of a woman who had been caught, and the sight of it gave me a morbid kind of satisfaction. I was a ghost from her past, and she couldn't deny my existence. The art collector, Mr. Finch, was now fully on my side, or at least his curiosity was. He saw the drama unfolding and knew it was the kind of thing that would make his next purchase from Olivia either a legendary investment or a worthless scandal. "Evelyn," he said, using my name now, not my title, "if what you say is true, this is an utter disgrace. Olivia, you have some explaining to do." Olivia looked at him, then at me, her mind clearly racing for an escape. She tried a weak deflection. "Mr. Finch, this is a private family matter. My mother has been unwell for some time." I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Unwell? Is that what you call a woman who lost everything, including her home, while her daughter was living in a Tuscan villa?" The words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow to her carefully constructed facade. Vanessa, the ever-loyal agent, stepped in, her voice a poisonous hiss. "Mrs. Reed, you are making a scene. If you don't leave, I will call security." I just shrugged. "Go ahead.
I'm sure the press would love to see a millionaire artist's mother being dragged out of her own daughter's art show. It would make for a lovely headline, wouldn't it? Homeless mother ejected from daughter's exhibit. The threat of a public scandal was the one thing that stopped them in their tracks. They knew I wasn't bluffing. I had nothing to lose, and that made me more dangerous than any weapon. Mr. Finch looked at Olivia, his expression hardening. This is a serious accusation, Olivia. I need to know the truth. My reputation is on the line. Olivia finally broke. She collapsed into a chair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It was an Oscar-worthy performance, but I wasn't buying it. I knew her too well. Her tears weren't for me or for the pain she had caused. They were for herself, for the perfect little world that was starting to crack around her. "It's not what it seems," she choked out. I I was gonna help her. I got so busy." The excuse was so pathetic, so transparent, that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Busy," I scoffed. "You were busy living your life while I was wondering where my next meal was coming from. You were busy giving speeches about charity while I was sleeping under a bridge." I pulled out my old phone, the one with her number in it, and placed it on the desk. "I called you, I texted you, I sent you an email. I gave you every chance to be the daughter I raised, but you were too busy." This isn't just about money, Olivia. This is about what you did. You didn't just abandon me. You abandoned everything I ever taught you. You became a stranger, a caricature of a good person. The words were like a physical blow, and I watched as they landed. She looked at the phone, at the physical evidence of her betrayal, and the last of her defenses crumbled. She was a woman without a mask, and the sight of it was deeply, profoundly satisfying. Mr. Finch, clearly a man who was used to getting answers, now looked at me with a new respect. He saw that I wasn't just a bitter old woman. I was a woman with a purpose, a woman who was fighting for her dignity. He looked at me and said, "Evelyn, what do you want? What is it going to take to make this go away?" I smiled, a cold, hard, vengeful smile. "It's not going to go away, Mr. Finch, not until the truth is out. But I do have a proposition, a way for Olivia to make things right, a way for her to show the world that her homeward collection isn't just a lie." I leaned in, and my voice dropped to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "She's going to tell my story, the real story, the story of what happened to me. And she's going to do it on her terms, in a way that she can't back out of." They were listening now, truly listening. They thought they had me figured out, that I was just another bitter old woman. But I had a plan, a devastating, elegant plan that would not only expose the lie, but also force her to confront the truth of who she had become. The final act of this drama was about to begin, and it was going to be an ending no one saw coming. The tension in the room was a living, breathing thing. Olivia, crumpled in her chair, looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated terror. Mr. Finch was staring at me, his eyes gleaming with a newfound fascination. He wasn't just looking at a woman anymore. He was looking at a story, a scandal, a piece of art in its own right. Vanessa, ever the pragmatist, broke the silence. "Evelyn, what is this proposition you speak of?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "What do you want?" I smiled, a cold, predatory expression that felt utterly foreign on my face. "I don't want money. I don't want a piece of her fortune. I want something much more valuable." I took a deep breath, and the words came out like a carefully rehearsed monologue. "I want her to give a public speech about her new collection, not a pre-written, sanitized speech. I want her to stand on that stage and tell the story behind her Homeward series. I want her to tell the story of the woman who raised her, the woman she abandoned, and the journey that brought her back to her roots. I want her to tell the truth,
All of it. Olivia's head shot up. No, I can't do that. My reputation, my career. I just looked at her, my eyes as hard as diamonds. Your reputation is already in the toilet, Olivia. This is your only chance to salvage it. The public will forgive a mistake, but they won't forgive a lie. You have a choice. You can let the truth come out in a messy public scandal, or you can control the narrative. You can be the hero who admits her mistake, or you can be the villain who gets exposed. Mr. Finch nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. He understood the game I was playing. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was giving them an opportunity, a way to turn a disaster into a PR masterpiece. She's right, Olivia, he said, his voice quiet but firm. This is your chance. You need to do this. You need to come clean. Olivia looked at him, then at Vanessa, who was staring at me with a look of grudging respect. They were all trapped in my web, and they knew it. And, I continued, I want to be there. I want to be in the audience. I want to watch you tell my story. And when you're done, I want you to look me in the eye and apologize. Not in private, in public, in front of everyone. The demand was so brazen, so audacious, that for a moment they all just stared at me. It wasn't about public humiliation. It was about forcing her to confront the human cost of her actions. It was about making her feel the shame and the guilt she had so long avoided. Olivia's tears began to fall in earnest now, not from shock, but from pure, helpless fury. She was a woman who was used to getting her way, and she had just met her match. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a new kind of hatred. "I'll do it," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "I'll do it, but you'll regret this. You'll regret ever coming back into my life." I just smiled. I have no regrets, Olivia. I gave you everything I had. Now it's your turn to give me something back. The truth. The deal was struck. I had forced her to agree to my terms, and the final act of my revenge was about to begin. The stage was set, and the audience was waiting. All that was left was for her to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The confrontation was over, but the real test was yet to come. Would she follow through? Would she finally tell the truth? The answer would determine not only her future, but mine as well. Stay tuned to see how the final, jaw-dropping conclusion unfolds. The next day, a cold dread hung in the air, a silent accomplice to my impending victory. I had done it. I had cornered my daughter and forced her hand. The art world, a place of carefully curated illusions, was about to be rocked by a dose of harsh reality. My heart, which had been a stone of fury for so long, felt strangely light. The day of the press conference arrived with a miserable drizzle, as if the sky itself was weeping for the impending drama. I dressed in the same simple thrift store dress and walked to the gallery, feeling more confident and powerful than I had in years. I was no longer a ghost. I was the author of her destiny. The gallery was a different scene this time. Gone were the glamorous attendees and the free-flowing champagne. In their place was a small army of journalists, their cameras and microphones a hungry metallic sea. The atmosphere was charged with a different kind of energy, not adoration, but morbid curiosity. They were there for the scandal, the story, the fall. I slipped into the back of the room, unnoticed, a shadow in the corner. I found a seat and watched as Olivia walked onto the stage. She looked different today. Her usual confident stride was gone, replaced by a nervous, hesitant shuffle. Her face was pale, and her eyes were dark circles of exhaustion. She was a woman who had not slept, a woman who knew she was about to face her reckoning. She approached the podium, and a hush fell over the room. She looked out at the sea of faces, and I could see her searching for an escape, for a way out of the trap she had walked into, but there was none. I had seen to that. She began to speak, her voice a small, trembling whisper. "Thank you all for coming. I wanted to talk about my new collection, Homeward. It's a very personal series of paintings, one that speaks to the journey of finding your way back to your roots, to the people who made you who you are." She paused, her eyes darting around the room, and then she saw me. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I saw it all. The anger, the resentment, the fear. She took a deep breath, and then, with a terrible, agonizing slowness, she began to tell the truth. She started with the small details, the little fibs she had told over the years. Then she moved on to the bigger ones, the phone calls she ignored, the emails she deleted. She told them about my illness, about the insurance company, and about the house I had to sell. The words tumbled out, each one a confession, a painful admission of guilt. The journalists listened, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The air was thick with the weight of her words, a raw, unfiltered honesty that was a far cry from her usual polished speeches. She spoke about her fame, about how it had poisoned her soul, about how she had become so obsessed with her own success that she had forgotten the one person who had made it all possible. When she was finished, the room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. She just stood there, her shoulders slumped, her head down. And then she looked up, her eyes finding mine again. She walked off the stage and walked towards me, every eye in the room following her. She stopped in front of me, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for what I did. I was a fool." The apology was not just for me. It was for herself. It was a recognition of the monster she had become and the human being she had left behind. I looked at her, at the raw, vulnerable girl in front of me, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw my daughter again. The woman who had been a ghost was now a person, and the woman who had been a star was now just a daughter standing in front of her mother. Finally home. The truth had set us both free.
The apology was a confession, a public atonement that sent shockwaves through the room. The journalists, stunned into silence, scrambled to get a quote, to get a photo of the millionaire artist and her formerly homeless mother. But I wasn't there for the spectacle. I was there for my daughter. I reached out and took her hand, my fingers wrapping around hers. Her hands were soft and manicured, but they were trembling, just like mine. I looked at her, and I could see the real person underneath all the makeup and the designer clothes. I saw the little girl who used to paint pictures of our rose garden, the girl who would run to me for a hug after a bad day at school. "It's okay, honey," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "It's okay. You're home now." And with those words, the dam of emotion broke. Olivia collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The photographer's flashes went off like 1,000 tiny explosions, capturing the moment of a reunion, a raw, unfiltered moment of two people who had found their way back to each other. I held her, stroking her hair, whispering words of comfort. It didn't matter what she had done. All that mattered was that she was there, in my arms, a lost little girl who had finally found her way home. The fallout from the press conference was immediate and explosive. The headlines were everywhere. The art world's dirtiest secret, millionaire artist exposes her own cruelty, a mother's revenge. The story went viral, a testament to the power of a good story and the public's insatiable appetite for truth and redemption. The Homeward collection, which had been a lie, was now an honest masterpiece.
The art collectors, who had been on the verge of pulling their support, now saw the paintings in a new light. They weren't just art. They were a testament to a human drama, a painful journey that had a beautiful, redemptive ending. Olivia's career didn't end. It was reborn. She wasn't just a brilliant artist anymore. She was a symbol of redemption, a person who had made a terrible mistake and had the courage to admit it. Her foundation, which had been a lie, was now an honest testament to her desire to do good. And as for me, I wasn't just the homeless mother anymore. I was Evelyn Reed, a woman who had lost everything but had found her way back to her family. Olivia and I started over. We spent months just talking, rebuilding the bridge that had been destroyed by her ambition and my pain. We moved into a small apartment, a quiet, simple place that was a far cry from her penthouse or my old house, but it was perfect. It was our home, a place where we could finally be a family again. The money, the fame, the art world, it all faded into the background. All that mattered was us. My revenge, which had started as a bitter, vengeful plan, had ended in a way I never could have imagined. It hadn't just exposed her lies, it had exposed her heart, and in doing so had healed mine. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't to destroy someone, but to save them, and in doing so, save yourself.